right, I would like to call to order the ARB meeting for tonight, Wednesday, March 23rd. Roll call, please.
Howard.
Here.
Larson. Here. King.
Here.
Snyder.
Here.
Hutt. Here.
Okay, can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we are at citizens' time. Would anybody like to speak for citizens' time that does not have an active application? Okay. Next thing on the agenda is minute approval. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from our regular meeting on February 17th? 16th. 2021? 2022. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from our regular meeting on February 16th, 2022?
Yes, I move that we accept the minutes of February 16th, 2022.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are accepted. Okay, now we will move on to our agenda items.
Okay, so tonight we have 3 agenda items. Mr. Leek did let us know that if we wanted to bump agenda item number 2 ahead of the demolition permit request, since it might be a lengthier discussion, that would be all right. So if everyone's okay with it, I would like to move ZP 2022-0311 for the Haymarket Baptist Church ramp ahead of agenda item number 1 for the demolition permit request.
Okay.
Okay, and with that, we are on packet page 90. So tonight we have with us a representative from Haymarket Baptist Church. Dee is here to answer any questions that you may have, but this is for an addition of an ADA compliant ramp to go in the front of the church. There are images that are provided here as well as part of the application, and this would provide better access for the accessibility into and out of the parking lot and the building. It makes the most sense to have it here at this door versus the main doors. Again, it's a shorter connection for those 2 ADA parking spaces that are right there. What they've provided as their proposed addition is in keeping with the guidelines, and I do recommend approval. So if you have any questions, we can call Dee up to the podium to answer anything that you may want to discuss.
Go ahead.
Emily, do we have, I guess I was surprised to see the handicap ramp on the agenda. Do we have, what discretion do we have? Is it just in terms of materials? What's the?
Just, I would say in terms of materials and colors.
Okay.
I mean, it's going to be concrete, correct? It's going to be the poured concrete, so, you know, we don't have much say there, but just putting it forward for the aesthetic, you know, discussion of the ARB. But it is in keeping with what they need to do to meet regulations.
I didn't have any questions. I think visually it looks clean, and it's matching I don't think there's much that you could do just in terms of changing the visual to it. So I don't have any questions or concerns.
If there's no questions or concerns from the rest of the board, on page 93, there is a draft motion.
Would somebody like to read make the motion?
I move the board to approve the COA ZP 2022-0311 for the ADA ramp as presented in the agenda packet at 14800 Washington Street, Haymarket Baptist Church.
Second?
Second.
Howard?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes. King,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Butts. Yes.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Okay, we will jump back up to agenda item number 1 now. And that brings us to packet page 5. In your packet, we also have included the presentation that Mr. Leek gave at our last meeting. That is the PowerPoint presentation in the agenda. We did do the site visit, so for those watching or listening, we did the site visit of the firehouse and the bungalow this evening at 6 p.m. We toured both of the buildings. We went inside of the firehouse structure. We were given a brief history by Marchant out front regarding the history of the building and the different additions that were added on. Connor then expanded on some of the history, additions, uses while we were inside of the building and the general appearance. So we can follow up on a discussion of our site visit if you guys would like to start there, and then we can go through other questions that you may have for the applicant and any discussions.
I'm sure I didn't have any questions about the site visit, but I've listened to the presentation again. I do have some follow-up questions and comments.
So can you, I want to go back, some of the same questions that I had also in our prior meeting, just in terms of, if we go back to when the applicants originally purchased the property, the condition of the property then as compared to what it is now, has there been, how significantly has that, how much of the condition has the property changed from that time to now?
To be honest, ma'am, I don't have a straight answer for you. Unfortunately, was not involved at that time when the property was acquired from Z Properties. I can speak to the fact that it was vacant for about 25 years, and that the client went in and came in front of the town to try to do some things and was unsuccessful, and has complied with the Virginia Building Code when violations were issued to share up those items that were raised on those violation letters. Outside of that, I would be hypothetically speaking and not giving you an honest answer that I can speak to, unfortunately.
Okay.
Anybody else before I go into my, do what I do?
Go ahead, I'll prepare some in, I have some others.
A lot of the questions I had, he already answered at the site, so.
Okay, so just for, in terms of disclosures, I met with Emily and Connor last week before the packet went out, just any follow-up questions that I had a chance to talk to Connor about. So Connor, I'm going to rehash some of those questions again. So the building maintenance code case, it was started in September of 10th, and then it was abated in around December. In the first part of October, Ms. Zizios had reached out to Emily to file an application. Emily had mentioned the requirements that were necessary. Shortly thereafter, there was another maintenance case that was filed for the bungalow. And as part of that, there was a follow-up by the building official asking Emily to sort of clarify what the status was, either the zoning requirements or the historic designation. I got the impression what we talked about is that second case was to, which is, there's relief under the ordinance that says if the building official says it's condemned and needs to come down. I assume that was the purpose of this second case, was to weigh in or have the building official weigh in on whether or not it would need to come down.
Yeah, he came onto the site to point out to the Zizios what items needed to be fixed and how he could work with them in a timely manner to fix any other additional items that were coming up on that September report. And at the same time, we asked him his opinion on the matter. Unfortunately, he never replied to us in writing what his official opinion was on it.
Okay. I mean, it's your belief you can seek under the ordinance, so it is what it is, but I was just curious as to what, if you felt that remediation, that demo was the only requirement for that.
Yeah, if I may, with the county, what ends up happening is you have a building official come out, look at the property. Their next step is to come out and bring out a structural engineer that is on staff with the county to come out and do an assessment of the property. And then they take that structural engineer assessment and they make a determining case on that. Obviously, wary of taxpayers' dollars and already having a structural engineer's assessment on hand, one was not done.
I guess ultimately the case was labeled as unfounded on that second one, so I guess he just never responded. Okay. Similar to the chairwoman's questions, part of the challenge is we have an ordinance that says no owner of a designated building within the district shall allow it to deteriorate to the point where it is not economically feasible to repair it or restore it. So that's sort of the dilemma: is how do you distinguish between what was a condition that was taken over and then versus was the state after that really the impact that created the neglect and the necessity to tear it down? Any other thoughts other than what you had talked to him about how to sort of resolve that? I'm sorry.
No, my apologies. My opinion on the matter would be that there was a reason the county stopped using it. There was a reason the county left it vacant for 25 years, and that was because of the condition it was in. I could not give you an honest answer and state that I know that the property was in this condition when they bought it, and it's in this condition today. Again, that would be me hypothetically trying to come to an answer that I don't know the truthful facts to. But what I do know is that the county left it vacant for 25 years, and that there was a reason why they did not want to put the money into it to rehab it or to reuse it or to do anything along those lines.
Okay.
Well, and I guess my question, though, is not necessarily for the county, because they purchased it then from the county. So at that time, when they purchased it, was there, and I know we're kind of looking at the intent piece, but was it their intent then to have it demolished and rebuild something new, or to take the existing properties and build something, refurbish, recondition, rebuild, and put a new property there? Or upgrade the current property, and then that didn't happen. And that is why I asked the question too. If it was in a certain condition when they purchased it, and they did let it further deteriorate, so now to the point that it doesn't have structural integrity, that leaves us in a little bit of a dilemma.
Of course. I don't think that the property, I'm not a structural engineer. So obviously my background is in real estate development, as well as construction. We've moved properties, we've rehabbed properties in the town. So my statements, I don't want to come across as trying to have the education of a structural engineer, because I don't. I can only speak from what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Of course.
And obviously, as you look through the packet, Firehouse specifically between pages 55 and 74, which are the photos of the structural engineer, I would say that it's hard to state that those were not pre-existing prior to the client purchasing them and moving those on. Remember that engineer's report was done in 2017. They purchased it there in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. With that being said, between the two, it's hard to say that all of those problems happened in that short amount of time when they were fixing the violations that were popping up from the county on the code maintenance. Now, could we all say that, yes, all that happened within 4 years? Sure, anything can happen. But I would, and I'm not trying to shift blame, but I would say that it's very unlikely that all of that happened within that short amount of time. And from my professional experience, I would state that it was most likely done during those 25 years, the vacancy from the county where it got deteriorated to that point. The clients purchased it, had the hopes of being able to rehab it, wanted to be able to do so, to try to do it. As I stated last meeting, obviously Virginia is a buyer beware state, so shame on the client. And me and my clients have this conversation all the time. It's hey, look, you should have known that it was in a historic district, and you should have known that if you could not have rehabbed it, that you had to go in front of the ARB to get a COA to demo. So they were not under that. They did not know that. I was not the broker at the time. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is to, or excuse me, it's not is what it is, that's an scapegoat, but it's to the point to where they had the sole intention to be able to rehab it after receiving bids back after understanding that they were going to have to go into a county tap and sewer and water and the amount of damage that was done to the property. It was not feasible to do so.
Right, and I understand that it's not, you weren't there at the time, and it's unfortunate that they're not here to kind of share what happened at that time, to shed some light in that area. So I appreciate you, sharing what you do know.
Yes, ma'am.
Just as a follow-up, I discussed this with Connor last week. So I had met with Sturgis Isios about a week before he went to closing. So when I clarified that with you, is that I think he had already signed, and then I had met with him and outlined many of the requirements, and I think that's what the statement was related to. It was after they had already agreed to contracts when they inquired about what was necessary, and it was the same standards then as mostly that there are now. And I mentioned earlier too, there was several open houses and stuff like that before the request for proposals was done, or as part of the request for proposals that was done there. I have other questions.
Well, I wanted to ask too, I know you mentioned that there were some violations and some repairs that they made. Do you know what they've done, like what repairs have they made over, since they purchased it?
Yes, ma'am. So for a vacant building in the state of Virginia, so Virginia has what's called a building maintenance code, and it's the minimum requirements for a occupied building and a vacant building. So if you have an occupied building, you have to live up to these standards on the outside. If you have if you have a vacant building that nobody's in, nobody's occupying, then you have to live up to these standards. And we'll discuss the vacant side. So on the vacant side, one, it has to be secure. So obviously, as we went over there, and the key was the drill, was we had to be able to screw in the door because we had kids, as you saw, graffiti was inside. People kept breaking in through windows, through the doors, prying them open, so we literally had to have the building secure in that sense. The other one, as I've stated, was windows. So we had to board up the windows that were broken and be able to cover those up. The other one is killing paint and roof. So we had to patch the roof. If you stood back from the bungalow and looked back at the firehouse to the east-northeast direction, you could see where patches were done on the roof to fix up the holes that you would see in the assessment there. So those were the types of things that were fixed and done from the Virginia Maintenance Code violations that occurred.
Okay, thank you.
Listen to the presentation again, Connor. I tried to ask a question about ROI, and I thought of a better way to ask it. So when I say about the return on investment, if the sale price, which you purchase, is part of the calculation to determine the ROI, the presumption was when they bought it at below market value because of the condition, because of the tap fees, because of everything else that needed to be done. In the time since then, the increase in property values, the new investment that we see, that would not be enough, or how would that situation not benefit the ROI?
Yeah, dealing with this ROI, a return on investment, is more looking at the capital expenditure that would be necessary to bring it up to an occupancy standard and what the use would end up being. Obviously, as we look at construction cost, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's going to be $300 a foot, although today if we were to go start cracking hammers over there, yeah, we'd probably be around $250, $300 a foot, just because of what inflation is today and what construction costs are today. So I'm going to try to be realistic with you and not utilize that to have a biased opinion on my side. So bringing back to if we were talking pre-COVID and we were talking what would it take, we're probably somewhere between that 140, 190 a foot to rehab the inside. Now remember, that's just rehabbing the inside of the structure itself, so we're talking pretty much going in and core filling those CMU blocks, which the new Virginia Building Code requires for anywhere that there's lintels in. So we're literally having to go in, drill into each one of those CMU blocks, core fill it, and then repatch it. If we're putting in any new lintels, which again to the report, we're having to do so, replace all the wood with steel, going in and replacing windows, replacing doors, adding insulation, adding HVAC, putting in toilets, putting in a new roof trusses which are broken, so on and so forth. That's where that 140 to 190 would be, depending on what the end use is. Again, if we're putting marble and mahogany in there, we're probably up to the 190, 200. If we're just going builder grade, we're probably down near the 140. on a typical pre-COVID construction cost basis. Now, when I say that's just to rehab the building itself, that's to do that. Now remember, we still need to hit a tap fee. Well, to hit a tap fee, just to go to the county and say, hey, let me put a 1-inch line in, we're talking $60,000 just to do a tap fee. We're needing to pave the parking lot. We're needing to put in stormwater management. We're needing to put in landscape and buffering, ingress, egress, site plans, architectural plans, all these different types of things that are on, in addition to the 140 to 190. But so when I look at an overall return on investment and we're looking at the necessity to put that amount of money into the structure to be able to just get a quote-unquote occupancy permit plus the additional site fees, it's well past what I call a laugh test of return on investment. We brought in, one of the questions last meeting was, hey, well, what about other town businesses that are wanting to stay in town and come into town? And we named a few, and I walked the property with them with a couple of those town businesses who wanted to stay in town, but all of them came in there, looked at it, and said, there's no way I can do it on my budget. There's no way that it would be feasible. There's no way that it is. Let me know if they get torn down, and maybe we can buy the site and build from there. But again, my clients don't want to tear it down and sell it. They want to be able to build it. They have local businesses. They live locally, not within the town of Haymarket, but within the zip code of Haymarket, and they want to be able to bring one of their town businesses in. So looking at a realistic return on investment, not even bringing into consideration the acquisition price, the ROI, in my opinion, based off my experience and other experiences that I've had and conversations that I've had with other brokers and other prospect buyers, is that those parcels are not rehabable on that side to make sense.
So let me ask a question, and this is, I'm definitely not the building expert that you guys are. So just in terms of rebuilding, so say it was demolished and then you're going to replace and put a new structure on there, from a cost perspective, is that, cost-wise, is that significantly less? Because you're still going to have some of the costs that you would have should you choose to repair, and rehab this structure. So how is that significantly less expensive than rehabbing the old structure?
Yeah, of course. So there's two ways to look at it. Number one is understanding that, hey, when we go in to rehab this outside of the bones, because obviously we can't tear down the CMU. We can't do anything to the foundation, leaving that as is. And so it's trying to put a quote-unquote a Band-Aid over the current structure. So for instance, you're kind of pushing off maintenance costs to the future. Otherwise, it's kind of like buying a used car today and putting a couple thousand into it to get it up and running and going and being usable, rather than going out and buying a brand new car that you know you're going to have at least 6 years on that warranty and be able to drive and not have any worries on. So you're going to pay a little bit more in regards to the upfront cost on it. But one, the banks will see it, because the banks will be able to see, hey, look, we're not going to be having to worry about prolonged maintenance on it. One of the big concerns and conditions is that it's a hollow core CMU building. Again, it wasn't backfilled. There's no rebar. There's no concrete in it. You can see the cracks within the engineer's report. You can see the cracks in there. And so it comes down to, hey, look, we could probably put a Band-Aid on it, put some lipstick on it, and get it to go along for the next probably 5-10 years, but then we're going to come back to new issues, then we're going to come back to other instances. So then it comes down to, what if we just stripped it all the way down to the CMU and put a brand new everything on it? And then it's just the cost-effective side to it is, well, it doesn't make sense. It would make more sense just to be able to tear it all down and rebuild a new structure in its place.
So to say back to you, what I guess the intent of my question was, any advantage to acquiring the property at the value that they did 10 years ago? You're saying all these other factors, that value would not have a significant impact. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I bought it cheap, but even though I bought it at a lower rate, all these other costs being a factor, that's why it makes it, what I hear you saying.
Yeah,
all these
so,
other factors.
well, I respectfully, my counter argument to it, just because I was not in real estate at that time, I was just out of high school, would be that what was the market
Thanks for
rate?
that one, Connor.
I don't want to lie to this dais and say that I had the experience back in 2013. So my question would be, what was the market value then at that time, And what would that property be? Because your statement is that they bought it for the cheap, but my counter to you would be, how do you know they
Poor
bought it
choice
for
of
the cheap?
words. I mean, I guess they bought it less than full market value because of the condition.
But how do you know they bought it less than full market?
Okay, touche. So, any other ones before I go through my list? Okay. So this is more of a comment than a question, Connor. So some of the statements that was made last month about other buildings, and it was part of the ROI discussion. Lane Motors, Donnie Leonard's house, you and I talked about AC Watts and the Pardo house. I would say there's more of a backstory than just return on investment. Each of those properties, it's a small town. There's a number of reasons why those properties and the way they are. I do know that Lane Motors did get bona fide offers that reused the buildings at a significant price point, but there was other decisions as part of that why those sales did not go forward. Ms. Leonard has her approval for her demolition permit. At the time, it was because of, could be argued, demolition by neglect. You know, unfortunately, that, even though it's approved, it continues to fall down around her. Pardo, same thing. Ms. Pardo, we've had that discussion before, why she's held on to the property and why I've walked that property with her, with a contractor, with an architect. The contractor gave her a bid on what it would do. At the time, it was considered reasonable. She chose to wait for another opportunity. So it's been a series of decisions and other things. So I would not just say it's not just that people can't make it a go. It's just there's other variables that are involved in each of those structures. So I do have a question. So zoning issues, it seems like whether or not these buildings stay or not, you're having zoning challenges. We talked about the 0 lot lines. I think some of those setbacks can be waived. You talked about 4 stories. I don't know that 4 stories would necessarily work there. But I guess, again, whether buildings there or not, how do you anticipate overcoming some of these other challenges? I'm sorry. You and I talked about, the discussion last month was more of trying to rebuild the firehouse up against Washington Street, less about the bungalow. Is that because of the parking that you wouldn't be able to try to, maybe not the same footprint, but try to create 2 buildings, one on Jefferson and one on Washington Street?
Yeah, so we have about 1.2 acres in there.
Okay.
Things we have to take into consideration is many of the ones that you already mentioned. So talking setbacks, buffers, ingress, egress, parking. I think parking is probably one of the biggest ones, and I think parking has parking today. There's no way you could currently park that based off the current footprints of the building. There's just no feasible way with what it is. I mean, you have almost 9,500 square feet. Unlikely that you're going to put a restaurant in both buildings, but if you did, you would need 95 parking spots. I stated last month I'm no civil engineer, but based off of an average of a 10-foot parking spot plus needing ingress egress buffers in there, I think you can probably fit in maybe 30, 35. When you get down to it, the only way that you could be able to park it, if you could even find a way to fit in the 30 spots, is if the entire use for the entire both buildings was retail or office use, because that requires a 1 to 250 square foot and 1 to 300 square foot. So parking, I think, is going to be an issue on the site currently.
Just would you argue, would it be with or without? I guess that was my point. With or without the buildings, it still seems to be a challenge.
To a degree, because I think it depends on the scale of the buildings, and that's to where I brought up the 4 stories. If I can stay lean and go up 4, it's a little easier because I'm not covering as much FAR. If I'm going wider and doing 3, obviously I'm taking up more surface area and taking away the parking spot. So I think it really is going to come down to, obviously, 1 is the discussions that we have with the ARB over architectural. 2, it's going to be the conversations we have with the Planning Commission regarding parking, and if we can get a parking waiver, or maybe if the town wants to buy and do a parking lot, that'd be awesome, and then we could all be able to share off and use it. But I think parking is going to be one of the big ones. If we can get some 0 lot lines, or if we can be able to push up onto Washington Street and get away from those necessary setbacks, I think that can help the overall site Obviously, we're not going to really have head-in parking on Washington, so kind of how you could park it today almost. So those are some of the concerns and barriers that we would have to cross over.
So if you, in talking about kind of just a 3-story versus 4-story and what would go there in any way, shape, or form, so that what you shared, that like their intention would be put, potentially a restaurant or a business or a wine bar. Are they also looking at doing something multi-use then, which would be the multiple stories?
No, I think ultimately what would actually be really cool and what the market would be asking for is having a restaurant, cafe, wine bar on that first floor, and then second floor having some sort of meeting space, kind of like how it used to be utilized as a meeting hall, having as a banquet facility, things along those lines. Obviously, again, then we come into the issue of, well, how are you going to park it? But I think if we look at the right scale to it, I think that's one option. If you were to ask me, Connor, if you own the property, what would you do with it today? I would tell you first floor retail, second floor office, third floor apartments or condos. Because obviously, if you want to have that walking ability, it's best to throw, similar to how you have in Old Town Alexandria and Old Town Manassas, you have those apartments above the retail use, and you have the direct user, which forces folks to walk. And the more people you see walking, makes more people want to walk. You get a municipal parking lot, get rid of the blacktops that are all around each one of the parking areas, forces people to walk as well. So those are some of the things. But their use, what they're wanting to do is that restaurant cafe type situation. They're from Greece. They'd love to put in a Greek restaurant, things along those lines.
So we talked about tonight about, the willingness of, I know we can't condition this on what the design will be, but we can certainly talk about what the options are. And one would be keeping the door access, keeping some of the elements of not the entirety of it, but just the original building. So I think that would be key to being able to recreate that aesthetic.
Yeah, I think large garage doors on Washington Street would be key to that.
Okay.
I think laying out some sort of footprints of the firehouse, I think, would be extremely important to the site.
So you and I talked about today about, obviously the hotel being here has an interest in what's around it. And I talked briefly with one of the owners about, would they have an interest in how this, obviously they have an interest from an aesthetic standpoint. They have a building looking across the street at these other buildings, but what relationship would you see, or potential relationship with these buildings with the hotel being, some sort of shared parking for valet after hours? What would you see as sort of that relationship?
Yeah, don't
Potential
want to speak for the hotel owners or for the Zizios. Obviously, that's a conversation that would take multiple months to come to a conclusion on.
Mhm.
But I believe that they have a general friendship that would make them work together. I think that you brought up a unique idea to try to revamp and reutilize with some of the property owners on Washington Street to have a rear parking lot with a drive aisle through it from Jefferson to Madison. And I could see that, I could see a partnership being put together, but again, it would have to come down. If I said, hey, yeah, I need a partnership for a JV for a shared parking use, but then at the same time, you all are going to look at me and say, well, Connor, you still need to meet the parking regulations of your current parking, and the hotel needs to meet their parking regulations in their parking lot. So it would have to take some consideration from the Planning Commission and the Town Council, but I think that there could be an overall use for that in that parcel and the adjoining parcels.
So board members, council is looking into the parking issues that you just noted, as well as some of the access issues on these properties. Because I think, as we mentioned on the site visit, if you're having those small little lots, if you have to access them from Washington Street, you're eating half your frontage up with a driveway. And so there does seem to be some interest for the council to try to revisit that. And I did talk to Connor about whether he has, because of the relationships he has, if he can facilitate some of that. So the point of raising all these, Connor, is that, and you and I can probably talk long about this, but the last three structures that we've had to, well, this is a sidebar. Last month, the comment was made about, I think and you and I talked about this a little bit, statement about properties being held near and dear to some hearts.
Yes, sir.
I would take exception to that in the sense that all the buildings recently are the buildings listed on our list. So if they're near and dear, it's because we're now having to debate a lot of the policies and the criteria for these sorts of things. So Bean Baker, that's in flux. Who knows what the end of that property is going to be. I understand why the Payne Lane house, and we could talk for hours about the influences of that, but the end result was a dumpster pad on top of the old foundation. I think with this project, if we are to have a relationship with the hotel and all the property owners, I would hope by having this exercise, we can do better. We can do better than having the only option for the hotel to do that is to put the dumpster pad on the last resource. That's our southern gateway, and if there's, rather than having parking on this side, that was the point of the conversation earlier, is if there's opportunities to make sure we keep intact some of that gateway coming in versus some of the options that the hotel was backed into having to do, that would be the intent of this whole exercise, if that makes sense. So, I'm almost wrapped up with mine, but anybody else have any comments? Okay. Board members, the only other thing I could think about is after, Connor, thank you for answering, the questions. I guess for tonight's meeting, do we want to, like suggestion, do we want to sort of split what are our options? I talked to Emily today, there's two separate requests. It's presented as one, but we can either vote on them together, we can discuss options individually. How do we wish to do that?
I think we can discuss options. And the only thing I wanted to say too, when I had gone back and read the inspection reports, I think the thing that stood out to me about the two properties that was different, for the bungalow, there's language in there, like under their recommendations, that clearly states poor existing condition with significant remedial structural work. So, I mean, that's kind of telling about the condition of the bungalow. But I don't see that same language. There are a lot of recommendations in terms of repair for the firehouse, but I don't see that same poor existing condition with significant remedial structural work. I understand what you've shared about the, the cost, et cetera, but that's kind of what stands out to me when I see language from the inspection on those two properties.
I did have another point that I'm sorry I forgot to make. So, Connor, last month in your presentation, you had emphasized not having a state or national status. None of our properties in town, maybe for the church or for possibly the museum, would qualify for that. So could you walk us through again sort of the point of emphasizing that it's not a county, state, or national resource?
My opinion, but the town has an ordinance on what it is, and I know I opened up that, as Marchand said, the property is probably hold near and dear to some folks' hearts. And then later on, around the 45-minute marker, I stated that, hey, look, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that it's not important. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's not historic, because it's listed in your bylaws, it's listed in your comp plan, it's listed in your zoning ordinance for a reason. One of the biggest things that I always have conversations with in regards with Marchand, when I talk, I always say, hey, look, it's not feasible today, in my professional opinion, to be able to reuse this. What my opinion is why don't we build something today with the ARB that's going to be remembered in 100 years from now, that they're going to be able to look back on and say, wow, look at that. That it used to be the firehouse here, and then they built this building, and that becomes the historic building, because the five of you working with the property owners, myself, the town staff, we're able to build something that's going to be beautiful, that we'll be able to remember on and be able to look back on in years to come and say, wow, what a great decision that was. That's going to be a historic landmark for time to come. So my other side of the opinion, obviously coming up as an applicant, My job is to try to state, hey, here's the research that I've been able to come up on. And to Marchand's point there's nothing regarding a state or federal or local, I mean, when I say local, I mean county, report that says that a historic event happened there, a person was born there, anything along those lines that would meet the requirements for the county, the state, or the federal checkbox pretty much to be considered a historic landmark. Now, based off of the town's ordinance, it is, and there's nothing has to happen in that location to be able to become historic. One of my takes is, if this was the first firehouse on the western side of the county, and it was to where all the townsfolk got together, why did the county not look at it as a historic resource and not put it in their relic that it was this historic resource and submit it to the state and try to get it approved on that level? I don't know the answer. I'm not going to try to know the answer because I don't know. But when I look at it, I respect the ordinance. I understand that it's listed in there as an ordinance. But I also, realistically speaking, if we were to pull the dais and Ms. Kimberly, Ms. Emily, and myself, I think each person in this room would have a difference of opinion on what is historic and what their personal opinion is. It's like wine. Everybody can have a glass of wine, the same glass, and everyone's going to tell you that it tastes differently. But it's that thing. It's what does history mean to you? What does historic mean to you? And yes, I'm not going to say it's not because it's in your ordinance that it is a historic resource to the town. What I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to take that and demolish it and build you a beautiful new historic property that you're going to be able to look back on and say, I was a part of that, and the benefits that are going to come from it, from the new jobs that will be generated, the businesses that will be able to come in here, so on and so forth.
Thank you for that. And the reason why I brought it up, because it's come up in the last 3 applications. And each time I'll respond with sort of the citation, if I may, is that, not attaining inclusion in a state or national, this is from the comp plan, registers no way negates the importance of being designated as historic on the local level. Historic resources are fragile and non-renewable. If they're destroyed, the loss is permanent. Unfortunately, a great deal of Haymarket's past has been lost already through development and a lack of maintenance. Nevertheless, many of the town's important resources still exist. So I do get a lot of feedback about my citation of this, but it is one of our charges as the ARB is to do that, and I realize it can come across sometimes as a subjective exercise. The other part of it, architectural styles, the town's historic structures are important because they contribute to the Haymarket's sense of place and provide tactile lessons on the cultural influences of the people who built the community. New construction should be encouraged, to your point, new construction should be encouraged to respect and blend in with existing historic structures. In the coming years, the town should encourage the use of both colonial styles and new construction that reflects the extant historic structures. So I think the challenge that we have is our town would burn down, right? And it became, hodgepodge is not the word, but it became an eclectic mix of architectural styles. So when you drive through town, even the buildings that we would subjectively find unattractive still make our town unique. And so how do we blend these new structures with the old structures so that when you drive through town, you can tell it's not, you can tell it's been built over time, not sort of consistent architecture across the, the board, the way some of the new developments are today, so.
Right, and if you, yes, in 100 years, whatever's here now may be historical if it's still standing, but still you are, for us now in this current time, if you take, right, my opinion or everybody's opinion out, it is considered, a historic structure in the town. And if we, I'm just kind of reading back through the report, it does deplete the town of 2 structures that are considered to have historical significance. And, if you take them both down, that's kind of where you are. And to Marchand's point, I'm not going to say they're near and dear to my heart, but there's a point for them being historic resources. And if we think about every time something is allowed to fall into disrepair and then somebody wants to demolish it, then everything that has any kind of historic significance is going to be torn down. There will be nothing left. And we cannot require you to rebuild something that's going to be a replica or even reuse any of the materials. So we would take you at your word, but you could decide something else, or the owners could decide something else at the end of the day. And then we've lost 2 historic properties.
It's an unpopular position to be in, to be up here. It's not fun to be in that position. Emily, I had another question for you. So in you and I talked about, and make sure I take this back correct, is your assessment of these structures and having to, in effect, build more than 50% of it, that weighed in on your analysis is to say that by the end of the day, you're more or less rebuilding the structure, and that from an economic perspective, it would be cheaper to, if you're going to rebuild it, more or less rebuild the entire thing, why not just build from the ground up and keep using it? So did I catch that correctly?
Yes, especially the bungalow. How much of the foundation needs to be repaired and the exterior? At what point are you completely rebuilding?
Okay. Appreciate the healthy discussion.
Of course.
Right, so what do we do next?
So I get a lot of feedback on me talking a lot at these meetings. So you guys realize I do this for a living, and so I tend to,
Right.
besides just talking a lot, I tend to do this a lot. So, okay, here's my suggestion on options. If we take them one by one, what would be the preference? Do we want to debate the merits of, okay, I know the preference would be to have a decision tonight, Connor, but if we need one more to get this, whatever our straw vote is on this stuff, maybe we wrap it up, either way we go. So what would be preference? Talk about the bungalow first, talk about the firehouse first? That's easy, that's easy enough, so, okay. Listed as a, a contributing resource. In terms of why it's a resource, my interpretation would be it's a bungalow style. It tells a style, a particular style. I pointed out some of the ornate sort of things. I remember the porch being more ornate, but when we went in there, I was remembering some sort of grand entrance. So I think if you were to take back a lot of those add-ons, I don't know that it would be the iconic example of a bungalow. We're losing bungalows, that style in town, and it would hope would be with new styles coming in that we can start to reflect some of those. And that was the point last month about it. Okay, so we could. One option would be we could approve the demolition permit with conditions that it be documented. Documentation being, some general architectural description, additional photographs in addition to the survey that's already done. Emily, was there any more relic information that was provided?
The only additional relic information that was provided for either property was more of a deed change, kind of explanation. They pulled those items from the record office, so the relic library is still working on that. They're still submitting stuff over as we would gather it. I, as staff, would take care of putting it into the necessary files, and then we would take care of that on our end.
But that
Either
would-
way, whether you vote yay, nay, indifferent, that will still be done.
Okay. Now, I think that we would want to verbalize why we would want to do that, whether we still felt it was not a contributing resource or that it was just for a number of array of contributing factors. We did not feel it was a viable use, that we agree with the presentation and analysis, because we will be judged on this. Either way, we will get
Right.
feedback on it. So the other option, if we were to deny, Connor has, I think we talked about before, there is a code provision that says if they were to appeal it to the council and the council denied it, for 1 year, it would be needed to put up for sale. Now, what the applicant has said is that and we were asked, Emily and I were asked if we know of anyone or any other interested parties that may want to come in and do some sort of private-public partnership. That's not readily available. This process, it says for 1 year based on the sale, the relative reasonable sale price,
Fair market value,
fair market,
to be
reasonably related to its fair market value.
fair market value that the purchaser would have to come in and have a deed restrictions where they would have to rehab and restore it based off that value.
Okay. And I'm reading through it now. I think that would have to be a coordinated effort that has to happen in the open between both parties. But the idea would be that takes it to a different exposure. That would be putting it actually up on the market for sale and having to do it for a year. Now, challenge is it sits for a year. The one side to that is all these other zoning issues that we have in play. That would be the opportunity for us to work with all the property owners, figure out what needs to be done to reuse, to recreate both buildings, and then wait out if there's some opportunity for someone to come in and make it work. When we talk about the other properties, kind of, we talked about this last month, all the other properties that have been able to adaptively reuse, which these two are perhaps the worst, there was unique, each of those owners had some unique ability to make that work. The idea of putting it up for a year is to see if there is someone that could come in and make it work. But what we've talked about for now is that there's not been generally, at least on the sort of the private side, been a lot of interest in that. But that takes time, and it takes a willingness to go through these other options. And at the end of that year, correct me if I'm wrong, end of that year, then the owner can step in and demolish it if no one's purchased it. That's a tool, but it's a time delay. So, and then any questions on those options?
No, those are our options for both.
That would be my, Emily, any other suggestions or options? Approved with conditions and some general discussion about why we felt it's appropriate in this instance, or, and I try to exercise this other option and work on other, that can happen either way. I'm sorry, that can happen either way. Whether the building's down or it stays up, we can still work with the owners to come up with. But once they're down, they're down. So.
Does everyone feel comfortable voting on both? Do you feel like we need more discussion?
Yeah, those would be the options for both buildings. The only other thing I would offer on the firehouse side was partial demo. Do you want to? No? Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying you're partial.
Yeah. Do you do a partial demo, pull it back, you know, and mothball the original structure, and then see if there's options. So, any thoughts on? Any response on
How do you partially demo it?
you take it, remember we looked in, you would physically take off the structures. You remember we saw the windows that were all boarded up on the, each addition we went into?
Yeah.
You could see the original windows that were boarded up. You would just have to take that down and mothball it. But you still have the same challenges that
Yeah,
Connor's already talked about with trying
at
to
that
reuse.
point, you know, like how are people going to be able to tell that that was the original?
Oh, how are people passing by?
Yeah, like, I don't know. It just seems like it's.
That's fair. You would sort of have to know more history about it to understand that's the original thing, but
Yeah.
Right, I mean, in a partial demo, are you leaving, you know, the footprint and the general
That's what I'm.
CMU structure, you're taking off the roof and you're gutting it and you're leaving the original,
Foundation in the walls?
I think the suggestion would be is you tear off all the additions. Your question would be, would you damage the rest of the building when you did it, and what do you leave exposed?
And if you
And
pull
what's
up
the utility in it?
page 78, you'll have an image of the firehouse, and you might kind of follow along with the discussion, and looking at the image, you might better understand which section that would leave standing.
It's that long rectangle. It's basically the building up, the room upstairs, and down below.
it's
think-
the left side with the double doors.
It's the left side, yep. And that's where the community hall that we're standing in up top, or whatever the hall was. Connor, what would be your concerns about something like that? Still the same issues you'd have to deal, whether it was all together or partial, right?
Yeah, so let's break it down. So first one would be put on the development hat side of things and realistically look through that. And it's okay, how do I now take this A-framed building and realistically and aesthetically tie it into an overall development? If we're doing that, we're removing probably, I would have to put an overlay to get the square footage that we'd ultimately remove, but then it's, okay, is the idea, is the thought process, and spitball with me here, would it be to have another building alongside of it to be able to build next to it, or is it, hey, you're really just leaving this A-frame right here, and we're not going to build anything to the side of it now, and you can build something back along Jefferson Street, or I'm just trying to realistically see how we could tie that into the overall development of the site. Because we would have a very small structure on a very big site at that point. So I'm just trying to realistically think and artistically think, how could we tie that A-frame, that smaller A-frame, into it? That's one section. The other section to it is the demolition side of things, and how is it feasible to be done? Sure, but are there risks and liabilities of causing damage to that A-frame? Possibly. The roof line on that, I'm now having to change a roof line, I believe. I'm trying to remember how they tied the two roofs into each other, and the back sections where you step down. But I see a roof line change there from the construction standpoint.
The idea
Could
on
be
the front,
challenging.
yeah, I think wouldn't be the step down, there's what, 3 additions in the back? It would just be the original rectangle, they call the A-frame. I wish I could have found, I was talking about when the last time they came through, in this building, the appearance of the new building kept that A-frame and built all around it. It added to it almost all the way to the lot line, all the way to the old bank building, opened up the doors, but it had those 2 distinct buildings that were, the front of it looked like it was 2 separate buildings, but it was one building behind it.
So that their original plan was to,
I don't know, was it to demo it or to build around it, or they were to rebuild, I can't remember.
So original was trying to keep it, then it was let's take it down, then it was let's try to find a way to try to incorporate just the A-frame in with the new development. And there were multiple different types of sketches that went around, and architectural renderings. I mean, I guess you feasibly, if you try to make it look like 2 separate buildings from there, kind of how the Winterhams have their setbacks and their different architectural styles on there. You could possibly do it.
Kind of the way they did it here, where they tied the 2 buildings. But your point was you'd have to, if you took the roof off the additions, you would have to do some sort of reconstruction of the
Yeah.
right
Now,
side
don't
of
get me
the
wrong.
roof.
A lot
because
of the
it's
roof
built
needs
into
to
it,
come
yeah.
off already because we have broken trusses in there. We have trusses that need to be replaced.
And the purpose of doing that would be to try to keep as much, it would basically just be a shell.
Yeah.
But you
The
still
hard-
have to reinforce the walls, you'd still have to,
The hard part is that it'd be extremely difficult, but with an open bank check, you could probably do it.
you know, obviously of the 2, it would seem like of the two, this is the one that has more of a,
right, I mean, if you look at just kind of, obviously they're both designated historical structures. There's a lot more, if you look at the research, you can see a lot more information and backstory for the firehouse. So I think you lose more if that goes down. And you, just based on the language of the inspections too, yes, there's a lot of remediation that would have to be done, but clearly the bungalow is in a condition that it would not be cost effective to try and remediate. That just doesn't make sense. It would be a hard resource to lose, but it doesn't seem like that's a viable option.
there's any number of reasons why the buildings in town have been in the condition that there are.
Right.
And what the town has tried to do is enforce the building maintenance code.
Right.
And then really, there's only, 3 structures left that are vacant, that would be subject to this sort of thing, and the hope would be that the rest of those that are used would not be allowed to go into this deterioration again.
Right.
That moving forward, we would correct the blight and not let it continue to happen, so. The other part with the partial side, that could be appealed to the council as well, and they may not see that that would give Connor or his applicant time to look at the feasibility of trying to incorporate in that, although it's pretty clear what the limitations are. But it would at least sort of invite, if we're doing our due diligence, it would at least invite the conversation Emily, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think the big issue is with the CMU, and if you look in the report, the recommendations. I mean, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's what 9 references to how the CMU either needs to be shored up. There's cracking CMU, or CMU needs to be replaced, and that's unfortunately the hard part about it. I mean, you have when it was built, it was built the economical way, which is now causing issues years later behind the cracking and the chipping and the degrading, so on and so forth, with that CMU. And that's the big issue on the foundation, or actually not on the foundation, the sidewalls. That's my biggest concern with that CMU.
I have a question on the side, the Jefferson Street side of it. There's one portion where you have a lot of plant material that's like growing up through the walls. Do you have that on the other side, that parking lot side by the Contrusi zone, the
Yeah.
parking lot? So is it the same kind of deterioration on that side with the CMU where it's essentially in sections it was disintegrating and the plants were growing up through it? Because I know that was one of the items when we were looking, I don't know if there's an image in the report here, but when we were looking at it, there were massive deterioration holes
You look at
in the
Packet page 70?
side of it.
Packet page 70 is where the original structure meets the addition, and I think that's what you're talking about. All that CMU on the
Yes.
corner is.
Yes, you're correct. That's
So
that area. There's that one there. I thought there was another one on the parking lot side. And then I know the front definitely needed paint above the main door
all the
areas,
cracking. Yeah.
but I didn't know if it was also starting to deteriorate. Because this section you're right, on page 70, there are sections where you could go, I mean, you could essentially put your whole hand in. I mean, there are large areas.
Okay. Any other? Yeah, this is where it's on the. Connie, you know what we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, with all the some of the CMU where there's the cement is. So in this, we're talking about if they were to recreate the structure and doing something similar. I mean, would there be any objection to using what'd you call this type of block? CMU, or at least giving that aesthetic on the front of the building?
May I ask to make sure I understand? So are you saying would there be an objection if they were to build something new to use the same CMU material? Is that what you
Something
asked?
that gives that appearance. So in other words, if you take it down to your earlier discussion about rebuilding as if it's there, our earlier comment about if you were to take this and mothball it, the original structure, and then build around it, could you not build a new building that creates the same aesthetic with the same sort of materials? You could. I mean, it's not no reason why you couldn't. I think it would be Connor's point. It would be cost. You know, how much it would cost to have that many materials on one building, but it's possible, I guess. Okay, similar to this one, it would be, what would be any conditions to approve it? Connor, do you see any utility? I guess we could put it out there where people wanted to come and take the rough-hewn boards, take any of the other, try to repurpose any of the wood framing and sign the original structure?
So all about it. My take is, how are you going to safely extract that?
To me, when you come in with your excavator and they pull it, they just pull it off to a pile and someone can come in and get it. So
Okay.
I may have a friend that may have done that solution before. So
I I can give you my honest word that yes, we can have the conversation with the contractor and tell them that the importance behind that, as long as it does not put the workers in any danger or safety, I think that can be a reasonable request.
So the point would be harvesting, that the applicant, with reasonable precautions, makes available any harvesting of the original board materials as part of the original structure. So, and similar with that would be sort of the same if we were to approve it, sort of some findings as to why we felt it was appropriate in this case. Any thoughts on that? Or why it might be appropriate this time around?
No.
Madam Chair, if I may suggest, if we take a straw vote on that,
Yes.
and then I could work with Emily to come up with, depending on where the straw vote is, come up with some conditions or conditions and findings that support that decision. Connor, are you guys in a rush if we had to clean it up and just get it wrapped up in a bow for next meeting?
We can be amenable to that.
A straw vote on both? Or on the?
Yeah, just do a straw vote on vote and where it goes, then we decide what other conditions or elements we want with it, and then we can work with Connor and Emily to, or I can work with Connor and Emily to, if that's okay me offering to
The
do it.
bungalow too?
Was that?
And the bungalow too?
Yeah, do straw votes on each, see where we're at. Are we okay with doing that, Kim?
I mean,
So essentially cast an unofficial vote, and then what we would do is Marchant, myself, and Connor would discuss the findings and the conditions, if any, that would go along with the official vote and motion that would be read at the next meeting. Is that,
Chair, can you-
Yeah.
That's what I was offering.
Okay.
Can you lead us, I guess, on the straw on the bungalow? You don't have to record it, it's just sort of where we're at.
so I would just say, we can ask the board to go around the dais in a roll call style, doing an unofficial straw vote on the demolition of the bungalow structure. We'll start there.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Demolition of the
Uh,
bungalow.
demolition?
Yes, so you're in favor, yes, not in favor is no.
In favor, yes.
Okay?
In favor of this, or do I need to read out the certificate appropriate, just, are you, okay, so let's do it.
On a straw vote,
Yeah.
it's not gonna be recorded as a motion. It's just gonna be a consensus, basically, of how the board feels, whether you wanna on the demolition of the bungalow. Yes, you're in favor of demolition of bungalow. No, you're not in favor of demolition of bungalow.
Okay,
So Mr. Howard has started and he said,
Yes.
so straw
Okay.
vote in favor of demolition of the bungalow.
I vote yes.
I'm a yes.
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 Okay. So on that one, we'll work together, Marchant, Connor, and I will work on drafting the findings and any conditions, meaning, do we want additional photographs submitted to the town of the different sides of the structure? And we can go through that.
Architectural, I think it was architectural description,
Mhm.
more so than we have, that uses the correct vernacular on how to describe it. Photo documentation, there's some standards, there's some recognized standards for how you
Correct.
document that. And then some findings why, based on our criteria, why we feel it's appropriate. Okay, everyone's comfortable with me working with folks to,
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
In terms of discussion, we have discussion on it. So going back to it personally, I struggle with this, someone who's seen it work, and the fact that as a town, we can do better overall, and I think we can continue to grow. When I say do better, that we can continue to grow as a community. And it's to see these other communities be successful and have these strong historic districts with a lot of contributing structures. Unfortunately, we've not been able to achieve that, and I think it's a number of decisions that have caused this. So it's with reluctance that I agree to it, but I think we need to be pragmatic, and I would just hope that the community respects the evaluation. We put you through the ringer tonight with a lot of questions, but I think that's our job, is to vet all these questions and these sorts of things. It's an unfortunate outcome, but I think it's realistic, and we need to be able to move forward. And I'm hoping that in the future that we can continue to work collectively with property owners to come up with the right tools that we can not have to continually have to revisit taking these buildings down. So that's my summary. Thank you.
Right. And I would agree with that. I've spoken in citizen time before about some of the matters that have come up before, so I would agree. That is my sentiment as well. Okay.
Now we're gonna do straw vote on the firehouse.
So straw vote on the demolition of the firehouse.
And this is, this first straw vote, I would say, is a complete demolition.
Complete demolition.
All right. We're going to start with the partial.
You guys want to start from the other side and go the other direction?
Let's just start with the complete demolition. So,
Okay.
Mr. Howell,
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson.
Can I do a I don't know?
Sure, that's why it's a straw vote. If you're not decided yet, then.
Yeah, I'm not decided.
Say not a NA.
Okay.
I'm a no.
I don't have a vote yet. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have a vote.
Okay.
That one's a
Okay.
hard one.
Yeah.
Now it's a partial
Partial.
demolition with conditions. Partial demolition.
Partial.
Mr.
demolition?
Howlett's a yes. You're a yes either way.
Partial demolition, Mr. Howell.
Oh. No.
I don't know. I don't have that.
I would want to know more about the conditions. I'm not ready to vote on that.
I would vote yes for the partial, at least as a starting point, but from there.
Yes for partial.
Madam Chair, if I may recognize, do we want to, for the next decision, prepare findings and conditions for both?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, both recommendation, full demolition, partial. Okay, on the full demolition, with reasonable public safety, harvesting of materials, photo documentation. If we can get, we had talked about getting the other, can we get the information that you have together, the stories about it? Kind of, you still have easy access to the
I
news
sent
articles?
it. I sent it to
Okay.
Ms. Hamlin.
If we can make that as part of sort of the conditions package to get all that sort of in one place. What would be the conditions on a partial?
I don't know. Got to save at least 60 or 70% of the original property, right? I mean, like he was saying before, if we take, how much are we going to take off of it? What's going to be left? That's
You're
going to be,
conditioning the A-frame.
yeah.
Conditions would be the A-frame with the opportunity to build.
No, I think the opportunity is
Yeah.
there to do that. It
Yeah.
would just be to keep that and then,
Same conditions, harvest any reusable materials.
I don't know that the additions have anything on it.
Right.
So I think with that, would we want an out to say that, the equipment operator that's, do you give it a reasonable out to say to the point that's reasonable, and I guess if they get into it, they pull one side
Yes.
off, the whole building comes down, well, then obviously it's not, so there's wording that we could say that, hey, to the extent possible, try to keep that, I could work on language with you on how to.
Yes, I think you have to have that in there.
If they get into it and just say, hey, we cannot reasonably extract these additions without damaging the structure, or, I guess the roof would have to be the obvious
Right.
thing that would have to be redone, but, okay.
Question, Marchant, of course, you and I can work on that language. Is it of any benefit for the applicant to try to get a structural engineer to come out and make a statement regarding removing those additions and present back a, signed off document regarding that? Is that of any benefit? And,
I would think so. I mean,
would-
that,
I would find that beneficial.
okay, if that's something the applicant would want to do.
No, I'm open to anything. I'm just worried about turnaround times.
Okay.
So if your meeting next month is,
It's the 20th, I know that's,
so, I mean, we have
Close.
4 weeks. What, 1, 2, 3? We have 4 weeks. not have it back in time to get it in your packet, but I can do my darn best to do so. If not, I'd have a paper copy that as soon as I get it, I can send it out. I just can't promise you that I'll have something to you by the cutoff, which would be the 13th, for you to have it in your packet for the 20th.
And I think that's reasonable,
I would agree.
as the board.
Is the expectation clear of what we're asking?
A structural engineer to come and say yes or no, is it feasible to tear off, or excuse me, to remove off the portion. So if you're looking at the firehouse, the portion to the right, so it keeps the A-frame,
Retain the original structure.
the original structure, and then if you go back to the back portion, once you take the step down, that portion comes off and the other portion behind that.
The original two-story A-frame,
Yep.
absent of everything else. Thank you for going through that exercise. That was a good suggestion, Emily, thank you.
Are there any questions, Connor, that you have for myself or the board before we wrap this discussion up?
No, I think the only thing that I need to get over to you will be engaging with the structural engineer to come out and do that, and then meeting with you and Mr. Schneider regarding stipulations of the bungalow, and possible stipulations, conditions of either a full or a partial for the firehouse. Outside that, I don't think I need to get anything else over to you all unless you all have anything additional.
I don't have anything. Does the
No.
board have anything else?
No.
No, thank you for going through this conversation.
Okay, so we will reconvene on this discussion at the April 20th meeting.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Connor.
thank you
Thank you.
again for
Thank
the
you.
site visit.
Oh, pleasure.
Okay, our next and last agenda item is a COA for a fence located at 6856 Jockey Club Lane for the Schneider family. So Mr. Schneider's going to walk down off the dais.
Lord.
So the fence does meet our ARB guidelines. We do need to receive the Green Hill Crossing HOA approval prior to the release of the zoning approval letter. So if the board finds that the fence is in keeping with the guidelines and approvable, we will make it conditioned on the receipt of the HOA release letter. If the HOA were to have any modifications to the application, such as the placement of the fence, then we would include that in our zoning approval letter. So pretty typical fence application. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Schneider tonight?
Sure.
What if we all don't vote?
Well, notice I'm listed as
Should we do a
Robert.
straw vote?
I'm listed as Robert on this application. Now, the only thing, I did get a call from the ARC, Architecture Review Committee Chair for Green Hill Crossing. I'm trying to match my neighbors, and there was some discussion that my fence needed to correspond with the back of my house. If anything, if the ARC, they may move the location of the fence back, if that makes sense, right?
So they're asking it to be on your formal property line?
No, so right now it's my.
Oh, I see what you're saying, with the back of the, yes.
The lot is like a trapezoid. It's a really weird lot. And my neighbors are farther forward than I am. So their backyards start about midway through my house. So I wanted to match their fences, which would meet in the middle of both sides.
I see.
I guess there was some discussion that I would have to move both of them back, both of the fences back to my rear of my house.
Correct.
So I'm going to be, so I guess if any condition, it would be that, it won't get any farther forward. It would only go back, and I would just work with Emily to make sure that the zoning permit had the right approval, whatever the ARC approves.
Are there fences on both sides? So on both sides they're fenced?
Correct.
Okay. That was the only question I had, was were they fenced on both sides, and was it going to match? And I know you have no choice in Green Hill Crossing, so.
ready to make a motion, there's a draft motion for you.
I would appreciate your support.
Where is it? I'll read it. Where is it? What page?
102.
All right. I move the board conditionally approve the COA ZP 2022-0307 for the offense addition at 6856 Jockey Club Lane as presented in the application, with the condition the homeowner shall provide the HOA approval letter to the town planner prior to zoning release.
We have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're in old business. As everybody's probably seen or maybe been, the hotel has opened this past weekend, so that project's been closed out now. We're wrapping up final planning things on it, but they are open and operating. Crossroads Village is continuing to do their build-out. We have not received any additional architectural updates since our last one, and I believe that one was with the Lidl, so we have nothing new yet. And the Robinson Village down here off of Washington Street, the townhouses are going up, so soon you'll start to see what we approved being installed, as well as the monument signs going up, so that'll be done here shortly. That's all I have for old business, unless anyone has questions on old business updates. Okay. New business updates, so that everyone's prepared, next month will probably be a heavier agenda month. So definitely take a look at your packets when you get them. If you have any questions ahead of time, please feel free to contact me as always. We will have an application from D.R. Horton, and they will be doing the design of the homes in Robinson Paradise. So that's back here over the bridge off of Walter Robinson Lane. So those will be presented. We'll go through that application. We may have 2 additional demolition structure applications. There is a older structure in that area off of Walter Robinson Lane that D.R. Horton will need to take down prior to the building of the new homes back there. And then there is also a demolition structure application that has been submitted for a property on Fayette Street. The house number is escaping me, so I don't want to misstate it, but at the end of Fayette Street in the curve, there's several homes there. There's an older like brick stone home, and then there's another one real close to the railroad, but it's all in the same property and a couple sheds. It's that property that is going to come before us. I am still waiting on the applicant to complete the application, so I'll be working with him hopefully this next month to go ahead and get that before the board. There is an interest in redeveloping that property to possibly be 3 single-family homes there. The space allows for it. So that is up for discussion. I know there has been some talk and discussion throughout the community, as well as some of the council has asked or mentioned this, but the corner house that sits on Jefferson and Fayette, long time ago received a demolition permit from the ARB, and a condition was given that it couldn't come down until building permits were received. There is now a safety issue involved. We're curious if the board had any thoughts on bringing the applicant back in and updating that COA and going back through the motion of granting an updated COA that would allow them to go ahead and remove the structure and then cut and do appropriate landscaping as necessary. They are currently working through the site plan. They are at the outside agency portion of it, so we should be wrapping that site plan up here in the next few months anyway. But this could possibly help us with a public safety issue with the structure. So if the board's interested in that, I will contact the applicant.
So they already have a plan to they're already working on their rebuild
They
plan?
received a demolition COA approval, and they already have a site plan in place for 2 single-family homes. They've actually already turned the lots in recordation office so that they now front on Fayette Street. So they're well on their way. It just might be a little bit longer until they're able to actually build the homes. And right now, there's a back door that keeps swinging open. We're worried about people getting in it. There's graffiti issues. In general, it's not a great, it's a hazard. It's a
Okay.
public safety hazard.
I think it's fine.
Okay. I'll talk to the applicant and see if he'd like to go ahead and come on in and have the discussion with the board, and we'll put that forward.
Just Sounds like the
yes.
thinking of it, or the rationale for it is no longer makes sense, I guess, what it sounds like.
What's that?
The rationale for that limitation,
Correct.
so it's
We
kind
were
of
under
good
the,
intentions, but
it was with all good intentions, we were under an impression that things would have moved along a little quicker. COVID happened, it did set back, some things, whether it was on the builder's end, the engineer's end, it set it back a couple years. So we're able to work on it again now, but just trying to avoid any issues that could possibly arise. So I believe that's it for new business that will be upcoming. Any questions on new business?
No.
Okay.
Planning Commission, the meeting was postponed. Basically, we wrapped up the survey, and we're going to be getting that out, next month, Emily?
I'm going to be sending it out via email and actually ask for Planning Commission to review, make sure it's what we talked about, and give a blessing via email so I can go ahead and get it in our newsletter. So it's exactly what we talked about at Planning Commission. It shortened it down. We got it to a 1-page front and back option, and there's a couple more write-in opportunities for our residents. So the commission will just give the blessing on that.
There was no other agenda items for the meeting.
Emily, you and I talked about, I guess, when you guys take up the historic district or the historic resources or whatever the relevant chapters are, that
On
if
the
you want
comp
us to
plan?
opine or want us to,
Yeah, that'll come to the ARB.
okay, I'll come to everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the comp plan?
Yeah, the comp plan
We're
update at
still
some
in
point.
the
Well,
very beginning
We're still-
phases.
oh, no, that's fine.
So
No, that's fine. I
we
couldn't
have
remem-
not forgotten, it just, we haven't even touched on it yet.
I didn't mean it that way. I just meant was it imminent, and it didn't
Yeah.
sound like it's imminent. So,
No.
um,
We went from, 25 questions to 6
Nine.
or 9?
It's 8 or 9.
So it's going to allow a lot of the residents a lot more writing, not just multiple choice, yay or nay.
cool.
Town council update?
I do have an old business question before you go into that. Emily, do you have any capacity to be able to look at the building signs?
Yes.
Okay. You just let me know. I think I was supposed to help you with that, so.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just as guilty on that one, so. This was to put the town hall, police station, so now that the hotel is open, not that people can't figure it out, but. Okay. Town council updates, we had, did I talk about, we had a work session 2 weekends ago? Was to really set sort of the priorities through the end of our term. The registration for council is coming up soon, if you guys are interested in being on town council. When, do we know when the registration is for that? We have to file by June 21st. Okay, and that would be for the November election. So, was that?
And I have the form.
So the hope is we get some people other than the usual suspects, for lack of a better term, into service. So feel free to talk to Kim or Emily or whomever about what's required to get something relatively easy to do. Just got to go down to the courthouse downtown, or in Manassas, I believe, get it done. So we did prioritize or look at prioritizing the sidewalk in front of the park, correct? That'd be nice. I don't know if you guys heard that we had gotten state or federal monies for the sidewalk. The sidewalk between, where you're at, Walter Robinson? All the way out to Heathcote.
Really?
But I guess they're gonna dogleg in front of the Walter Robinson driveway. So they'll come over the bridge, and then you'll have to cross over to the east side of Old Carolina to get out to Heathcote. Did I say that right?
Just to clarify, the county received that money.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, so it won't be a town-initiated project, but the county received the funding to do that.
So,
It will, like Marshawn said, leg over, crosswalk over, and then a little portion of Walter Robinson will go in, so it should all be connected right up into town once we get our site plan done.
that's exciting. We're looking at trying to get the site plan for the master plan for this wrapped up. The playground, I believe, that's become quite popular. We plan on talking about what we can do with the park structure, that house up there, to see if we can use that to help support, because we're seeing a lot more people use the park now. Well, I'm missing the other project. Was it a big project we were going to do? There's a sidewalk in front of the park.
I had somebody ask me about that, if that building would ever be put to use.
Is, as a staff member, I won't speak for council, but a hope from staff is that we can come up with a work plan to go ahead and work on the structure and open it for our community and our residents and offer a rentable space for our residents. It will also be offered to the outside community, but we would really hope to make it a space that, you know, our residents could have their birthday parties, small gatherings, things of that nature, that it becomes Haymarket's community center. So something that we could start with low level, low hanging fruit, get it open, get it utilized, and see where it can go from there.
I wasn't supposed to preempt that. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's something, you know, I hope that if any of you have an interest or want to show support of it, or know of neighbors who may really want to show support of it, I hope that you'll encourage them and yourselves to speak to council members. Council is definitely working on coming up with different ideas, so this is one that we will be presenting, and Marchant's actually going to be helping me with kind of a work plan. We looked at the basement today. That was our third historic building tour today. The cellar. So we're going to come up with some ideas on what needs to be done to make it a safe structure.
Isn't there another big ticket item we're looking at? I can't remember. Sidewalk, master plan, crosswalks. Are we doing crosswalks?
We are going to, VDOT will come in and update the crosswalks that they just put the high reflectors on. They'll modify that back to the stamped. And then we will be looking into better pedestrian safety measures. So that's something we'll work with Chief on some ideas for infrastructure, whether it be your bright flashing lights on the side of the road. So that was one thing we talked about in the strategic planning meeting.
And then lastly, could you remind me, I was asked when Farmers Market's opening.
Yes, so Farmers Market will open on April 24th. It'll be on Sundays, 9:30 to 1:30. We're super excited. I think we have about 20 vendors signed up. We have some new vendors this year, so it'll be very exciting to see everybody who comes out. And we also, on May 7th, have a community garden event. So we are reopening the community garden in partnership with Rooted in Education. That's a community organization who will run community gardens. So Nadia is going to be taking that over, and we'll have kind of a grand opening. It's open to anybody. So of course, you know, if you can tend to the garden and help here and there, and that would be great, but it is always open for anybody to take vegetables, fruits, herbs out of and utilize. We'll have some fun recipes and things like that as well. That'll be at the garden. So great experience for all.
And I wanted to ask, I had seen this morning, that it's something that the Northern Virginia region is doing. If the town would have any interest in doing its own, like, drive to help support the refugees coming out of Ukraine. I know around Northern Virginia, they're kicking off a campaign. I think it starts today. So they have, I don't know, like 20 or so sites around Northern Virginia. There are several in Manassas. And they have a list, like, of 5 specific things that they need.
Okay.
I didn't know if that would be something the town would be interested in kind of promoting.
Certainly. Could you send me some information on that? And
Yeah.
then I will definitely put it out to our powers of B that we can promote it, maybe have a drop-off location or
Yeah.
look into what exactly it would entail.
Yeah, I'm wondering, right, maybe they would add an additional drop-off location here, because there's nothing out a little, any further than Manassas. I'll send it to
Okay.
you. I heard it, it's, I mean, and it's not, it's like new coats, blankets, sweatpants and socks, and gloves. Like, it's kind of straightforward, this is what they could use.
Okay,
That'd be nice. I'll send it to you.
thank you.
That's all I had, thanks.
Thanks. That's everything. You just need a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion we adjourn the ARB meeting.
Adjourned. I need a gavel.